we have these TV programs about adoption and these wonderful stories of people connecting and the rest of it. But the truth is sometimes, well, I think often, far from that. I went looking for my birth parents when I was in my early 20s and was accused by my adopted siblings of being disloyal to the family.
Yeah.
In fact, quite grumpy with me for a number of years about daring to, upset the apple cart. And so it's for me, it's been nearly a 40-year journey of discovering family and trying to connect with who I am and so forth. And I met my birth father, but he was not a dad, shall we say.
Yeah.
He was my biological father, and I met my biological mother. And I have this bad habit, maybe it's the journalism part of me, of asking lots of questions and wanting to know the truth.
Yep. Yep.
And I discovered an interesting thing, along the way, Andrew, which is the people who are my age. So there would be my cousins and people who are close, who are sons and daughters of my uncles and aunts. They think it's very funny. They're kind of like, oh, bad Uncle Bob, had kids outside of wedlock and
Yep.
so forth. But his generation in their 80s, they want those skeletons to stay firmly locked up
Yep.
in the closet. And so me prodding and poking and asking questions uncovers some uncomfortable truth from when they were young. And even though you try to have no judgment, it's still an uncomfortable set of truth. And so it's kind of hard. And one of the things that I discovered, of course, is I had this wonderful shower revelation one morning. I'm looking for all these people who are connected to me, but no one was looking for me
Yeah.
because you're an inconvenient truth in the conversation. And even though I've got, half brothers and sisters, I've got no full brothers and sisters at all, but half brothers and sisters. And when they've grown up in families where there has been marriage situations and people settle down from their wild youth, they consider you to be an outsider. Even though we share exactly the same amount of DNA. So it's an interesting process. It's a painful process. And my adopted dad passed away over 30 years ago now.
Yep.
Still miss him and still grumpy with God, to be quite
Talk to
honest.
us about that actually, because you have two dads. For some people, that yes, there's complications. There's a whole bunch of fish hooks with adoption, but there can also be redemption and blessing in that as well. Talk to us about your adoptive dad, John. What sort of person was he?
He was a remarkable man. He was 19 when he went into the armored corps, fought in France and Germany, came out a little beaten up, was a 10-pound pom, came to New Zealand in the early 1950s, worked his backside off, built a home, raised a family, found out they couldn't have children early on, and so adopted two of us.
Yep.
And then a number of years later, as often happens, my younger brother miraculously arrived. He was their natural child,
Mm.
who walks on water, let me say, and I'm not bitter about that at all. He's a fantastic young man too,
Yeah.
actually. But my dad was a very hard worker, loved the Lord, always, characterized by having the word of God by his bedside. Served in the Methodist Church as a minister's steward, and was just, even though he was a pom, he was a good Kiwi bloke and a gentleman, actually.
How old were you when he passed, John?
I was 31, I think, when he passed,
Yep.
and was not ready for that. And as I say, still grumpy with God over that one. I miss
Yep.
him dearly, because he was well, he never got the joy of meeting his grandchildren. He was much older, so he was in his 40s when they adopted myself and my older sister.
Mm.
So life was in a different phase for them.
Yeah.
But he was a generous man. He was a kind man. Yeah.
I know this is tough, John, and thank you for the courage of sharing your story, because I also know that God has done some amazing things through your life and through the examples of your life. And I suppose the natural curiosity to go, who were my birth parents? What were the circumstances that led them to make the choice that they made? How do you feel about about them having taken some time to process that about your birth parents, particularly your dad, perhaps?
Yeah, because it's an odd thing because to be a dad, there's a difference between being a father and being a dad, of course,
Yeah,
and in his later, he died in his mid 80s. In his later years, he didn't remember who I was. Um, yeah, it was kind of a problem, I guess, for him. So it's difficult, and so you've got to put judgment aside. And if I think about what I was like in my teens and my 20s, I wasn't a good kid. I wasn't a good bloke. Um, so I could have fathered kids. But there's just a whole range of things that you've got to remember. So you've got to put judgment aside, and you've got to say these are humans. These are people who are broken, who have fallen, just trying to do their best,
yeah,
and sometimes they don't reach that standard. So I've come to terms and come to peace with that. I wish I'd had a relationship, a deeper relationship with them,
yeah.
and known them. And my birth mother is still alive,
Hmm.
but unfortunately they don't speak to me at all, and that's I can tell you that's painful.
That is tough.
And you find out things, Andrew, along the way, like I had in my lifetime, I had great grandparents and grandparents alive whom I never met. So these are genetic connections, and
Yeah.
and that's kind of hard to cope with. But there's a wonderful piece of scripture, tiny piece of scripture in the Psalms. Psalm 68 verse 6 says, "God sets the lonely in families."
Wow.
What a stunning statement that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And I know if I'd not been placed in the Peachy family, things would have been worked out pretty different for me, I think. My mother was a teenager. She'd had three children as a teenager. Very easy to get judgmental about that. Yeah, so you've just got to put it aside, and you've got to thank God for where you end up, and that He had some wisdom in the game,
Yeah.
and He knew that my parents were not capable, as teenagers, as young people, of doing the right things at the right time. So,
How do you
but
think this journey has affected who you are as a dad, John?
yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I probably overcompensate, I think. Probably my daughter, and I hope she's not listening. She's probably a little more entitled than she should be, because dads do spoil, and I think it's made me much more appreciative of her, and looking after her and making sure that her life is in the right direction. I mean, one of the, and we're not talking about forensic files now, but your DNA carries some coding,
Yeah.
man. And I can look at both my birth mother and father and see traits which frighten the heck out of me
Yeah.
that God is still working on. And you sort of go, I don't want to pass those things on to my daughter. She's just recently married, and and you want to see her do well. So I think it has shaped the way that I see her and the way that I want her life to go.
Yeah.
And of course, once you do the DNA and you find about all these people that she's connected to, I mean, her DNA is my DNA, so my
Yeah.
history is her history.
Yeah.
And you got to keep thinking about that if I try and cut off, or don't have good relationship with some of the people who we're actually connected to, she's going to suffer in the future. So it just, you balance out these things. And I can tell you, having 14 brothers and sisters who are genetically connected to you, but only a couple of them have any relationship with you, and that also forms some pretty strong opinions. That
Yeah.
is family, open question, is family the people that are genetically connected to you, or are they the ones who are in relationship with you? And it's impossible to have relationships with 14 brothers and sisters. Let me
Yeah.
put it that way.
Yeah.
So you pick, I guess I'm not saying you pick the best ones. That's not what I mean, but
No,
you
but
pick the ones who respond to you. And I've got a sister Sally who lives in Australia, who we're very close. And she lives in part of the country where her birth mother lives. We share a birth father, and her birth mother lives there, but her birth mother will not meet her.
mm,
She's a woman in her late 50s, and so you can share the pain and support people through this process. And so yeah, it's a book at some stage, mate. It really is,
yeah.
because it's quite. It's quite remarkable. One of the things I found out when I went to social welfare looking for my adoption details, I effectively stole a document off the desk when the woman left the room
Wow.
because it was illegal back then. Actually, no, I couldn't. The files were closed, and so I broke the law by sneaking a peek at a document to find out what my mother's name was,
Yeah.
and I found out that I was one of three that she'd had as a teenager, and that really rocked me because I thought I was the one lost child, and she was pining for me, and that just wasn't true at all.
Mm.
But I found out that my mother had told my other adopted brothers and sisters that they were the only ones, that she had no other children.
Mm.
And so when the DNA comes in, the old DNA tells the truth. It doesn't tell the story, but it tells
No.
the truth. And that was kind of another chapter in the book. So it's an
It,
interesting stories to
it
put
is.
together.
And I know that there'll be people listening to this at the moment. And I know a lot of people personally for whom adoption is part of their story. And unfortunately, one of the lies that speaks into this is that you were rejected. Rather than seeing yourself as chosen and set apart by God, that lie of rejection and not good enough and not wanted,
Yeah,
is that still
I
a
could.
work in progress, John?
Oh, mate. Yeah, now you're really sticking the knife in the right areas. Yeah, I mean, I've struggled with a capital S with rejection all of my life. No question about that. It is a spiritual thing as much as a psychological thing, I believe. And even though you can read the scriptures, and you know that you've been adopted, you've been placed in a family,
Yeah.
but there's still these doubts. But I tell you, one of our colleagues, Aaron Ironside, who's a counsellor, we were having a coffee one day, and we were just chatting about this whole process. I think I'd found another new, um, sibling in the DNA, and we were chatting, and he just turned around to me and he said, they didn't reject you because they didn't know who you were
Yeah.
when they gave you up for adoption. And I'm like, hang on a minute, just roll that past me again. He said, you were a baby. They didn't know who you were going to become. They didn't know the broadcaster, the dad, the brother. They didn't know anything about who you were going to become. They just rejected this little child because the child was just inconvenient at the time. And that actually made a significant, really grateful to Aaron, that made a significant difference,
Yeah.
knowing that who you were was not rejected.
Yeah.
They didn't know who I was
Mm.
or who I was going to become. And that might sound silly, it might sound obvious to some people, but boy, it's huge. And when you realize that when you think about your faith, that God don't care who you're going to become. In some respects, he just accepts you for who you are,
Yeah.
and then works on the rough, tatty edges, shall we say?
Exactly. Or he knows exactly what we like, and he loves us anyway, which is
Well, there's that.
yeah. It
He's got
is.
his work cut out for him with me. I can tell you that much.
John, I must say I feel bad in some ways because I know that this is, even though this is something which happened a long time ago, these are fresh wounds. These are wounds that this side of heaven won't fully heal. But just wanting to say thank you for having the courage to tell this story. I know that yours is a tough and complicated tale, but it is a wonderful redemption story of God's grace and God's love. And I know that many other people who perhaps in different ways intersect with your story needed to hear some of this today, especially as they're looking ahead to Father's Day, which honestly is probably one of the most terrible days of the year for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you one of the secrets, Andrew, that I've found to help with healing and progress is simply to pray for these names that you know,
Yeah,
even if you don't know the people well. I've got a list of people that I can pray and ask that God would find them, would bless them, would speak to them, would heal them. So it's just your prayer list gets long,
yeah.
because you know all these people. But for me, that's been a healing process when I can actually bring them, in the middle of the night, you wake up and things are going through your head. You bring these people before the Lord, and that is a healing and a saving process. I can tell you that.
John, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and I do hope that this year that Father's Day brings you some peace and some joy, and you can celebrate who you are as a child of God and as a dad that wants to pass on blessings and not curses to your own children. Thanks so much for being part of the program today.
Thanks, man.